Vincent Harper stood in his corner office on the 45th floor, staring at the city lights below without really seeing them. His phone had been ringing non-stop for 3 days. Investors, board members, business partners, all of them demanding answers about his personal life. The scandal with his ex-fiancée had made headlines everywhere. She had sold their story to the tabloids, painting him as a cold, unfeeling businessman who cared only about money and power. The worst part was that much of it was true. Now the board wanted proof he had changed. They wanted him to show up at the annual charity gala with someone respectable by his side. They wanted the image of stability, of a man who had learned from his mistakes. Vincent knew it was all about appearances, but appearances mattered in his world. Without the board's confidence, he could lose everything he had built. An unusual discovery. Vincent walked through his penthouse apartment late that evening, loosening his tie after another exhausting day of damage control. He heard soft humming coming from his study and remembered that the cleaning service had sent a replacement housekeeper this week. Mrs. Patterson, his regular housekeeper of 10 years, was visiting her daughter in another state. He pushed open the study door and found a young woman carefully dusting his bookshelves. What caught his attention was not her presence but what she was doing. She had pulled out one of his old business textbooks and was reading it, completely absorbed, her cleaning cloth forgotten in her other hand. "Those books are not for entertainment," Vincent said sharply. The woman jumped, nearly dropping the book. She turned around quickly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Mr. Harper, I apologize. I just saw the title and could not resist. I will get back to work immediately." She placed the book back carefully, but Vincent noticed how her fingers lingered on the spine, reluctant to let go. There was something different about her. Unlike the usual staff who avoided eye contact and tried to be invisible, this woman looked directly at him without fear, only embarrassment at being caught. "What is your name?" Vincent asked. "Natalie Brooks, sir. I am filling in for Mrs. Patterson this month." The proposition. Vincent studied her for a moment. She was probably in her mid-20s, with warm brown eyes and an honest face. She wore the simple uniform of the cleaning service, but carried herself with an unusual dignity. An idea began forming in his mind, desperate and perhaps foolish, but he was running out of options. "That book you were reading," Vincent said, walking closer. "Do you understand what it discusses?" Natalie hesitated, then nodded. "Corporate governance and ethical leadership models. I studied it during my degree program." "You have a degree?" "Psychology and business management, sir. I graduated 2 years ago." Her voice held a trace of bitterness. "But degrees do not pay bills when nobody will hire you without experience. Cleaning houses does." Vincent felt a strange twist in his chest. Here was someone educated and capable, reduced to dusting shelves in other people's homes. The irony was not lost on him. His company had probably rejected dozens of resumes just like hers. "I have a proposal for you, Miss Brooks," Vincent said, making his decision. "I need someone to accompany me to a charity gala dinner this Saturday. It is a very important event for my business. I am willing to pay you $6,000 for approximately 4 hours of your time." The silence that followed was heavy. Natalie stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "Excuse me, did you say $6,000? "That is correct. You would need to wear formal attire, sit beside me at dinner, and maintain appropriate conversation when necessary. Nothing more." The negotiation. Natalie set down her cleaning supplies slowly, her expression shifting from shock to suspicion. "Why would you pay someone $6,000 just to sit next to you at a dinner? You are Vincent Harper. Women probably line up for that opportunity." "My reasons are my own," Vincent replied coolly. "The question is whether you accept or not." "This is completely absurd," Natalie said, shaking her head. "I am a housekeeper. I do not belong in your world of charity galas and champagne." You have a business degree. You can discuss corporate topics if needed. You simply need to appear presentable and well-mannered. Vincent checked his watch impatiently. I need an answer, Miss Brooks. Natalie walked to the window, her mind clearly racing. Vincent could see the internal battle playing across her face. Pride warring with necessity. Dignity fighting against desperation. My mother is sick, Natalie said quietly, still looking out the window. She needs surgery that our insurance will not fully cover. I have been working 3 jobs to save money, but it is not enough. I am still $4,000 short. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears but her voice steady. So yes, Mr. Harper, I will accept your proposal. Not because I think this is right or normal, but because my mother's health matters more than my pride. Setting the terms. Vincent nodded, relieved to have solved one problem. Good. I will have my assistant send you details about the dress code and schedule. The event begins at 7 on Saturday evening. What exactly will you tell people about who I am? Natalie asked. As little as possible. You are simply my guest for the evening. They do not need your life story. In other words, I am there to look pretty and make you appear like a decent human being, Natalie said with surprising bluntness. Vincent felt a flash of irritation. I am paying you $6,000. I believe that earns me the right to expect professional behavior. Professional behavior, yes. Pretending to be something I am not, that is different. Natalie picked up her cleaning supplies. But do not worry, Mr. Harper. I can play the part you need. I just hope you are ready for what happens when people assume I am more than just a paid companion for the evening. What do you mean? People at these events talk. They judge. They create stories. Natalie moved toward the door. I just hope this plan of yours does not backfire on both of us. The agreement. After she left, Vincent stood in his study, questioning his decision for the first time. The housekeeper had courage and intelligence, qualities he had not expected. But he also sensed something dangerous in her honesty. In his world, people said what others wanted to hear. Natalie Brooks seemed like someone who said what she actually thought. He picked up the business book she had been reading and opened it to a random page. The chapter title read, The Human Cost of Corporate Decisions. Vincent closed it quickly and returned it to the shelf. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days to ensure this plan worked. 3 days before he would take a housekeeper with a psychology degree to the most important social event of the season. What could possibly go wrong? In her small apartment across the city, Natalie sat on her bed, staring at the $6,000 that could save her mother's life. She had agreed to something that felt wrong on every level. But when she thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed, waiting for surgery they could not afford, Natalie knew she would do it again. She just hoped Vincent Harper had no idea what he was actually getting. Because Natalie Brooks had never been good at staying quiet when something mattered. And something told her that Saturday night was going to matter more than either of them expected. Saturday evening arrived faster than Natalie expected. She stood in front of her small bathroom mirror, wearing a dress she had borrowed from her friend who worked at a boutique. It was deep navy blue, simple but elegant, the kind of dress that would not draw too much attention but would not embarrass her either. She had spent an hour watching online tutorials on how to style her hair in an elegant updo. When the doorbell rang at exactly 6:30, Natalie took one final deep breath. She grabbed her small clutch purse and opened the door to find Vincent Harper standing there in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He looked every bit the powerful businessman, from his expensive watch to his polished shoes. Vincent examined her appearance with a critical eye that made Natalie want to shrink back inside her apartment. Finally, he gave a small nod. You look appropriate. We should leave now. Thank you for that overwhelming compliment, Natalie muttered as she locked her door. The ride to the hotel was silent and tense. Vincent drove his luxury car with focused concentration while Natalie watched the city transform from her familiar working-class neighborhood to the gleaming downtown district where the wealthy lived and played. She had cleaned offices in these buildings but had never entered them as a guest. Entering a different world. The Grand Celestial Hotel was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from impossibly high ceilings, marble floors gleamed under soft lighting, and everywhere Natalie looked, she saw people who belonged to a world completely different from her own. Women wore gowns that probably cost more than she made in a year. Men discussed business deals over glasses of champagne that cost more than her weekly groceries. Vincent offered his arm in a mechanical gesture as they entered the ballroom. Natalie took it, feeling the expensive fabric of his jacket under her fingers. She could feel eyes turning toward them, assessing, judging, wondering who she was. "Remember," Vincent whispered as they walked, "be polite, smile when appropriate, and let me handle all important conversations." "Yes, sir," Natalie replied with exaggerated obedience that made Vincent's jaw tighten. They were directed to a table near the front of the room. Already seated were several people who radiated wealth and power. An older gentleman with silver hair stood to greet them warmly. "Vincent, wonderful to see you," the man said, shaking Vincent's hand firmly. "And who is this lovely young lady?" "This is Natalie Brooks," Vincent said smoothly. "Natalie, this is Mr. Lawrence, chairman of our board of investors." The corporate dinner. Dinner began with speeches about charitable donations and corporate responsibility. Natalie found it fascinating how easily these people talked about giving away money to causes while their own employees probably struggled to pay rent. She had seen the statistics during her studies. She knew how many companies gave generously to charity for tax benefits while paying their workers minimum wage. Seated to her right was Mrs. Pemberton, a sharply dressed woman in her 50s who served on multiple corporate boards. To her left was Christopher Stone, a businessman whose company competed directly with Vincent's. Christopher had barely acknowledged her presence, treating her like an accessory Vincent had brought along. The conversation at the table turned to business strategies. Mrs. Pemberton was discussing workforce optimization, which Natalie recognized as a polite term for laying people off. "We need to trim 15% from operations," Mrs. Pemberton said, cutting her salmon with precise movements. "The shareholders expect better returns next quarter." "Agreed," Christopher Stone added. "Workers today expect too much. Benefits, time off, mental health support. In my day, people were grateful just to have jobs." Natalie felt her fork pause halfway to her mouth. She glanced at Vincent, who nodded along with the conversation as if it made perfect sense. Something inside her began to burn. Breaking the silence. Mr. Lawrence turned his attention to Natalie with a patronizing smile. "This must all be rather dull for you, my dear. Corporate talk is not exactly entertaining dinner conversation." Natalie saw her opening and also saw Vincent's warning look. She knew she should smile, agree, and change the subject to something safe like the weather or the beautiful decorations. That was what he was paying her for. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. "Actually, Mr. Lawrence, I find it quite interesting," Natalie said clearly. "Though I do wonder how cutting 15% of your workforce will affect long-term productivity and company culture." The table went silent. Every face turned toward her with varying expressions of surprise. Vincent had frozen completely, his wine glass suspended in midair. Mrs. Pemberton raised an eyebrow. "I am sorry, what was your name again?" "Natalie Brooks, ma'am." "And what exactly is your background, Miss Brooks, that makes you question strategic business decisions?" Natalie could feel Vincent's panic radiating beside her, but she had already jumped off the cliff. She might as well see where she landed. "I have a degree in psychology and business management," Natalie replied calmly. "And I have spent the last 2 years working in positions where I actually see what happens to employees when companies prioritize profits over people." The challenge. Christopher Stone leaned back in his chair with an amused smirk. Oh, this should be entertaining. Please, enlighten us with your wisdom, Miss Brooks. What positions have you held that give you such insight? The mockery in his voice was clear. He expected her to crumble under the pressure. Natalie saw Vincent close his eyes briefly, probably calculating how much damage control this disaster would require. I currently work as a housekeeper, Mr. Stone, Natalie said without shame. Before that, I was a waitress and a retail assistant. Jobs that people like you probably never think about but that keep your world running smoothly. A housekeeper, Christopher repeated with obvious delight. Vincent, you brought your housekeeper to the most important charity gala of the year? That is priceless. But Mr. Lawrence held up his hand, his expression thoughtful rather than mocking. Let her speak. I want to hear what she has to say. The truth emerges. Natalie took a breath and continued, directing her words to Mr. Lawrence. You talk about trimming 15% of operations like you are pruning a plant. But those are not numbers on a spreadsheet. Those are people with families, mortgages, children in school. When you lay them off, you are not just affecting quarterly reports. You are affecting entire communities. Business requires difficult decisions, Mrs. Pemberton said coolly. I agree, Natalie nodded. But have you considered that high employee turnover costs companies much more than investing in worker satisfaction? Training new employees, lost productivity, damaged reputation. Study after study shows that companies with happy, stable workforces outperform those with revolving doors. Vincent was staring at her now with an expression she could not read. Shock, definitely. Anger, probably. But something else too. You studied this in your degree program? Mr. Lawrence asked with genuine interest. Yes, sir. Organizational Psychology and Sustainable Business Practices. I wrote my thesis on how employee wellness programs actually increase profit margins over 5-year periods. Natalie paused. Not that any company would hire me to implement such programs because I lack the magical thing called experience. An unexpected turn. Christopher Stone laughed harshly. So you are a housekeeper with big ideas and no practical application. Typical of your generation. All theory, no real-world understanding. I clean your offices, Mr. Stone, Natalie said quietly but firmly. I see the waste, the inefficiency, the low morale. I hear employees crying in bathroom stalls because they are so stressed they cannot sleep. I see managers working 16-hour days because you will not hire adequate staff. That is very real-world understanding. The silence at the table was absolute. Then Mr. Lawrence did something unexpected. He started laughing, a genuine sound of appreciation. Vincent, he said, turning to his host, where did you find this remarkable young woman? Vincent seemed to be struggling for words. She is very outspoken, he finally managed. She is honest, Mr. Lawrence corrected. And intelligent. Miss Brooks, I would like to hear more of your ideas. Perhaps after dinner, you could share your thoughts on our current restructuring plans? Natalie glanced at Vincent, who gave the smallest nod, though his expression remained unreadable. As dinner continued, the conversation shifted. Mrs. Pemberton began asking Natalie specific questions about employee retention strategies. Even Christopher Stone seemed grudgingly interested, though he continued to throw in skeptical comments. Vincent sat quietly, watching Natalie navigate these powerful people with confidence and grace. She was not the silent, decorative companion he had paid for. She was something entirely different. And for the first time in years, Vincent Harper felt truly surprised by another human being. The gala ended near midnight. Natalie sat in Vincent's car, exhaustion settling over her like a heavy blanket. The evening had been intense, filled with conversations that challenged every assumption these wealthy people held about business and success. Mr. Lawrence had spent nearly an hour discussing workplace reform with her, taking notes on his phone as she spoke. Vincent had remained mostly silent throughout, observing everything with that unreadable expression. Now, as they drove through the empty city streets, the silence felt different from before. It was charged with unspoken words, with tension that had nothing to do with anger. "You broke every rule we agreed upon," Vincent finally said, his voice quiet rather than furious. "I know," Natalie replied, staring out the window. "You can keep your money. I understand our agreement is void." "That is not what I said." Natalie turned to look at him, surprised. Vincent kept his eyes on the road, but his jaw was tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel with unnecessary force. "Then what are you saying, Mr. Harper?" "I am saying that I brought you there expecting a quiet companion who would make me look stable and responsible," Vincent said. "Instead, you challenged some of the most powerful people in the business world and somehow made them respect you for it." The confession. Vincent pulled the car over to the side of a quiet street and turned off the engine. He sat there for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Why did you really need that money, Natalie?" he asked, turning to face her. "The truth, not just the simple answer you gave me." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "My mother has a heart condition. She needs surgery within the next 2 months or the doctors say she might not survive another year. Our insurance covers some of it, but not enough. I have been working every job I can find, saving every dollar, but it is never enough. And you took my offer because $6,000 would make the difference between life and death for your mother," Vincent said softly. "Yes." Natalie wiped at her eyes angrily. "So you can judge me for selling out, for pretending to be someone I am not for money. I already judge myself enough." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held an emotion Natalie had not heard from him before. "Regret. I am the one who should be judged," Vincent said. "I treated you like an object I could purchase. I assumed that because you cleaned houses, you had nothing valuable to offer beyond your appearance. I was completely wrong." The unexpected offer. Vincent's phone buzzed repeatedly. He glanced at it and showed Natalie the screen. Messages from Mr. Lawrence, Mrs. Pemberton, and 3 other board members. "They all want to meet with you," Vincent said. "Mr. Lawrence wants you to consult on the restructuring plan. Mrs. Pemberton wants you to review their employee wellness initiatives. They see something in you that I was too blind to recognize." "That is nice of them," Natalie said tiredly. "But I have to get back to my real life tomorrow. Back to cleaning and waitressing and hoping my mother holds on long enough for me to save the money she needs." "What if you did not have to go back?" Vincent asked carefully. Natalie stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I want to offer you a position at my company. Director of Employee Relations and Organizational Development. You would work directly with me and the board to implement the kind of changes you talked about tonight." The world seemed to tilt. Natalie shook her head, trying to process what she was hearing. "You are offering me a job? A real job? A real job with a real salary? Enough to cover your mother's surgery and your living expenses?" Vincent met her eyes. "But I need you to understand something, Natalie. This is not charity. This is not me trying to ease my conscience. After watching you tonight, I realized my company needs someone exactly like you. Someone who understands both the business theory and the human reality." The resistance. Natalie felt anger rise in her chest. "So this is your way of fixing your mistake? Hiring the poor housekeeper to make yourself feel better about how you treated her?" "No," Vincent said firmly. "This is me recognizing talent when I finally see it. This is me admitting that I have been running my company the wrong way and I need help changing that." "I do not believe you," Natalie said, reaching for the door handle. "People like you do not change overnight because one housekeeper spoke up at dinner. This is guilt or pity or whatever lets you sleep at night, but it is not real." She opened the door, but Vincent's next words stopped her. "You are right. People like me do not change overnight. His voice was raw, honest in a way she had not heard before. But maybe, just maybe, we can start changing. And maybe we need someone brave enough to show us how. The hospital visit. 3 days passed. Natalie returned to her routine of cleaning houses and serving tables, trying to forget the strange night at the gala. Vincent had transferred the $6,000 to her account as promised, along with a note that simply said, "The offer stands if you change your mind." Natalie was visiting her mother at the hospital when she saw Vincent Harper walking down the corridor toward her mother's room. She stood quickly, confused and alarmed. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "I wanted to meet the woman who raised someone as remarkable as you," Vincent said simply. Before Natalie could respond, her mother's voice called out from the room. "Natalie? Is someone there?" Vincent looked at Natalie, asking permission with his eyes. After a moment, she nodded and led him inside. Mrs. Brooks was sitting up in bed, looking frail but alert. Her eyes widened when she saw Vincent in his expensive suit. "Mom, this is Vincent Harper," Natalie said awkwardly. "He is someone I met recently." "The someone who gave you $6,000 for one evening?" Mrs. Brooks asked with a knowing smile. "Natalie tells me everything, Mr. Harper." The turning point. Vincent smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually stern face. "Your daughter is extraordinary, Mrs. Brooks. She challenged an entire room full of powerful people and made them listen. Made them think differently about how they do business." "That sounds like my Natalie," Mrs. Brooks said proudly. Then her expression grew serious. "But Mr. Harper, my daughter is not something you can buy or own. She is not a solution to your problems." "I know," Vincent said quietly. "But maybe she could be a partner in solving them. If she is willing." He turned to Natalie. "I spoke with the hospital administration this morning. Your mother's surgery is scheduled for next week. All costs covered." Natalie felt her legs weaken. "What did you do?" "I made a donation to the hospital's cardiac care unit. Your mother is the first person to benefit from it, but she will not be the last." Vincent held up his hand before Natalie could protest. "This is not connected to the job offer. This is me doing what I should have done years ago, using my money to actually help people instead of just accumulating more of it." Natalie looked at her mother, who had tears streaming down her face. Then she looked at Vincent, really looked at him, and saw something she had not seen before. Sincerity. Vulnerability. Hope. The new beginning. "Why are you really doing this?" Natalie asked softly. Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Because you were right about everything. Because watching you speak truth to power reminded me why I started my company in the first place. Because somewhere along the way, I forgot that businesses are made of people, not just profit margins." He paused. "And because when I am around you, I remember what it feels like to actually care about something beyond my bank account." Mrs. Brooks reached out and took Natalie's hand. "Baby, I think you should listen to what he is offering." "But Mom, what if it is a mistake? What if I fail?" "Then you fail," her mother said gently. "But what if you succeed? What if you actually change things for all those people you talked about? The ones crying in bathroom stalls, working too many hours, struggling to survive?" Natalie looked between her mother and Vincent. Fear and hope warred inside her chest. This was everything she had studied for, dreamed about, worked toward. A real chance to make a difference. "I will accept your offer," Natalie said to Vincent, "but on one condition." "Name it." "You work beside me. Not above me, not delegating everything while you sit in your office. If we are going to change your company culture, you need to be part of that change. Actually part of it." Vincent extended his hand. "Deal." As they shook hands, Natalie felt electricity run through her palm. Vincent seemed to feel it too because his eyes widened slightly and he held her hand a moment longer than necessary. 6 months later. The conference room was filled with employees from every level of the company. Natalie stood at the front, presenting the results of their first quarter under the new employee wellness program. Productivity was up 18%. Turnover was down by half. And perhaps most importantly, employee satisfaction scores had tripled. Vincent sat in the back row, watching her command the room with the same confidence she had shown at the gala. But now she belonged here. She had earned her place through hard work, brilliant ideas, and a genuine care for people that had transformed the entire company culture. After the presentation, Vincent caught up with her in the hallway. "That was incredible," he said. "We did it together," Natalie corrected, smiling at him. That smile had become his favorite sight over the past 6 months. "Natalie, I need to tell you something," Vincent said, suddenly nervous in a way he had not felt since he was a teenager. "These past 6 months working with you have been the best of my life. Not because of the company's success, but because of you. Because somewhere between that first disastrous dinner and today, I fell completely in love with you." Natalie's breath caught. "Vincent. You do not have to say anything," he continued quickly. "I just needed you to know. You changed everything for me. You showed me what actually matters in life." Natalie stepped closer to him, her eyes shining. "You really think I did not notice? I fell in love with you too, you stubborn, wonderful man. Somewhere between your awkward apology and watching you actually listen to employee concerns, I realized you were not the cold businessman I thought you were. You were just someone who had forgotten how to be human. And I am so glad I got to remind you." Vincent cupped her face gently. "So the housekeeper and the millionaire?" "The psychologist and her partner in changing the world," Natalie corrected with a laugh. As they kissed, Natalie thought about that night 6 months ago when she had agreed to be a paid companion for one evening. She had needed money to save her mother's life. Instead, she had found something far more valuable: purpose, partnership, and love. Sometimes the most desperate decisions lead to the most beautiful destinations. And sometimes, the person you think you are pretending to be turns out to be who you were always meant to become. The end.